Kérném fel George Williams professzor urat, hogy tartsa meg előadását a jogi pszichológiai típusok és a vallási tapasztalatfajtai címmel. George Williams a Kaliforniai Egyetemben vallástudományi professzor, és a vallások közötti megértéshez és együttműködéshez való hozzájárulásáért 1989-ben kitüntető díjat kapott. Ez a szervezet a Vallásszabadság Nemzetközi Társasága, International Association for Religious Freedom, most idén Kolozsváron tartotta a 38. ha jól emlékszem, nagy világkonferenciáját, 128 éves az a szervezet, és George Williams-et választotta meg elnökéül. Tisztelettel kérem, hogy tartsa meg előadását. I ask George Williams, professor, to make his presentation. Please, come.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed faculty, students, I first have to thank Tardy Lashi, the conductor at Marchos Templum, where my wife was a choir member for 40 years. And he introduced me to Dr. Kranitz. I am very humbled and privileged to be in this extraordinary institution with a person of such international fame and such a great spiritual leader. Thank you so much for this invitation. I want to look at Carl Jung through his eyes to see what we can learn for international communication with other religions. We're asking a question of a psychologist who started in a way to destroy religion. So I've got to probably turn this first slide on. So don't touch anything else here. Okay. I'm sure I've got equipment here, so I'll try to be safe. I'm going to be talking about Carl Jung and his way of looking at the other religions. And I'm going to approach this through 5 different points. These points will be first, as Freud's chosen one is can't see it from here, so I'm going to have to look at my paper. I don't like doing that. Okay. The first thing will be about Jung and Freud. Then to see what was happening in the world at that time as other religions began to express themselves at the World Parliament of Religion. And then Freud rejects Jung, and Jung goes into mental distress or mental illness, and he will come out of it by looking for a foundation for his own thoughts and his independence from Freud. And as he looks into world religions, we get an insight in religion that we may not have had before. And finally, we'll be looking at the classical view of the experiential model that India had, that Vivekananda brought to the World Parliament of Religion. But first, what's in it for us? Why should we know another religion? Well, my friend Houston Smith is given credit for saying this. You can't know your own religion without knowing another religion. But another person said it more eloquently. That was Thomas Merton. And I had the privilege of meeting him in the Trappist Monastery in Gethsemane twice with our church history class. And he would say learning about different religions enriches your faith in your own. Understanding religions can deepen your understanding of your own. Exploring other religions is a path to deeper self-awareness of your own faith. And he said this while he was corresponding with the Dalai Lama and with the Zen philosopher Daisetsu Suzuki. So there is something in it for us if we are in the process of trying to know another religion. First, back to Jung. Jung had been adopted as Freud's, not only his, he said, eldest son, the crown prince, but his successor. Jung felt a bit like an outsider because as a Lutheran, he was not part of the Jewish club. And so I'm tempted to say a little bit more about his father and his relationship with his Lutheran father, but I won't. That is a side story that you probably know anyway. I see a few of you do know that story. Anyway, Jung was very much feeling like he was the chosen one, and for 2 years he rode on that choice. And then suddenly, 2 years later, he had published and spoken independently of Freud. And these are just 3 of the tiny issues that he differed on with Freud, eventually many more. He found in his examination of his patients, which were all in a psychiatric ward, I wondered how you could come up with an exemplar for us when you're looking at psychiatric patients. But that's where Jung was doing his studies, and he published, and Freud was so outraged that within a year, in 1913, he did not speak to Jung again. So Jung was exiled and suddenly began not only a depression, but he went into mental illness. We know that because of the Red Book. The Red Book contained the feelings of hallucinations, voices, a recording of all of that, and it is a very troubling book. What did I do? Go to several too far? Nope. So, Jung then looks for any kind of corroboration, and he began to find it in the symbolic and visual systems that you might think are part of a carnival act, because he looked at tarot and astrology and alchemy long before he looked at Eastern religions. And he saw in them the 12 houses of the astrology system, 12 different ways of looking at a human personality. But Jung was not looking for a personality theory. He was looking for a psychological theory that was different from Freud's, that was not founded in libido or sexual energy. And so he eventually came to Oriental religion. And I spent 3 years studying the relationship between Vivekananda's work and Jung's work, trying to prove that Jung had copied Vivekananda. I finally gave up on that project and let a couple of Canadians finish that work, leaving this connection out totally. Then 40 years later, I have discovered the things that I had missed before, so I'll never publish that. So we're going to be looking at Vivekananda, but first we're going to have to go back and see what was accomplished. By 1921, Jung wrote this monstrous book, 600 pages, in which he is going to have 4 different theories about psychological types all woven together. And I don't know how many times I poured through that, trying to make sense of what Jung was doing, but he was an intuitive. He would see something, he would write it, and then the next week, he would see something else. And so he will provide an enormous amount of material for a number of Jungian schools that will do counseling out of his, and they change it from a psychological types of human beings to personality types. And so I'll mention those a little bit later, but we will begin to see that he is going to be questioned about where he got this material. And so as he gets older and he's questioned in the 50s, he begins to tell the story that he found this in the Upanishads. Well, I'm at home when he makes that claim, because I've read all of the 108 principal Upanishads, and he could not possibly have found it there. He will say that each of these 4 types, and I'll get into them in a minute, but I'll mention them now. The feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuiting, and we'll do those in detail as we go. But he has made the claim that he finds that in the Upanishads, and these books are dialogues, usually between 2 ways of looking at the world, experiencing the world. And they're basically epistemology. How do you know God? And how do you know the sacred? And so they only have 2 in dialogue, not 4. And so we don't find that in Indian literature until we get to the Bhagavad Gita. The 4 are there, and I'm in a debate with my old friend Arvind Sharma, who's at McGill University. He says you can't find the 4th one there. But then he agreed with me 20 years ago, but now he's changed his mind, and it doesn't really matter. It is in the literature in India, and Vivekananda has a teacher that will tell him about the 4 different ways that one can follow a path of discipline that will lead to knowledge of God. Now, Jung said, I don't do epistemology. I do psychology. And so he left out epistemology, how you know, how you experience, how you philosophize, how you theologize. So he leaves all of this out to do psychology. Well, I'm not going to do his psychology for him tonight. I want to get past that as quick as I can. but I will show you what he found, because it is going to inform us in terms of our own experience that we can share with someone else, or how we can recognize someone who is on a different path, experiencing God in a different way, and we can recognize that, and we might even respect it. We haven't been too successful in the last 100 years, so I'm going to be careful about predicting what we can and can't do. Now, that 100 years ago is actually 123 years ago, actually a little longer. In 1893, at the World Parliament of Religion, another feature is happening. It is the bringing together of people to speak about their own religion. Now, people have been speaking about other people's religion and being their voice and talking about them and teaching about them. But in the World Parliament of Religion, there is a stage full of people who are invited to talk about their religion. And there were 1,000 delegates, 500 conservatives, 500 liberals, 4,000 attendees. And this was a big deal for weeks as people came to listen to representatives. And the second youngest person there was Vivekananda. Now, he wasn't a star at the World Parliament of Religion, but he stayed around America and Europe for 4 more years, and he became a star and became the representative of the World Parliament of Religion in 1893. Now, as you see, there were some very, very liberal Catholics and Jewish leaders there of real reputation as far as their credentials were concerned. And it was alarming to the conservatives at the Vatican that they might go too far. And so the Pope, Leo XIII, was cautious, but did not condemn the World Parliament of Religion and didn't condemn these Roman Catholic leaders, archbishop and a cardinal and some other bishops, on the same stage at the same level as these other religions. And so that was a moment of an attempt at dialogue that had really not been before, at least in the West. There had been one in India, and he got assassinated, but he was a Muslim. And he did come up with a religion or the truth of God. So there had been times of dialogue in India and also in China. Except in China there was no great reason to have dialogue, because if you wanted to learn about someone else's religion, you went to their institution, their monastery, and you practiced with them or you worshiped with them. And so there was this and we sometimes call it syncretism, but it wasn't syncretism. It was a multiple membership, a multiple belonging. And that was also the case in Japan, where you could belong to 2 things. I'll tell you a shocker that for me, the first time I met a Jesuit priest and a Zen master, Father Katawaki, professor at Sophia University. And he's old enough now to be 112. But anyway, I don't think he made it, right? No, okay. Out of that, about 12 groups ended up in what we call intra-religious communication or dialogue. The Quakers formed their group, and one of the groups, the only group that survived, was the International Association for Religious Freedom. It's now 123 years old. At this very time, the academic study of religion began occurring in the West, and Oxford, Harvard, state universities, and the state university that I went to was the first one to adopt this model that you learn a religion from a professor of that religion. And so I studied Chinese religion under Dr. Pajo. I studied Roman Catholicism under 3 different Catholics. I studied Lutheranism under the grand founder of the School of Religion at the University of Iowa. And it was a very different experience than the 2 conservative seminaries that I went to. Then my wife actually did more teaching than I did, but we went to Szeged and Page, and there, according to the American Academy of Religion, we were able to offer the academic study of religion for the first time after communism. And the bishop at Page had assigned all of his seminary students and asked for a class on world religions, and then after we did that one, he asked a class on the sects or cults of America that were flooding Hungary at that time, and we did both of those. I gotta tell this story. The first time our seminarians came in, there were 3 priests on the front row. They were doing a rosary, and they did that for about 10 minutes. And those who could understand Hungarian got 1 grand lecture, and those who could understand English, there were 2 lectures they said, and they said my wife was always better than mine. She was always ahead of me, and it was disturbing because she knew, she had listened to 7 years of my classes in California when I was teaching religion there. And so she knew what was going to come next. And actually, she remembers better the formulation that I did at a better moment in my awareness. And so she gave the better version. And anyway, it was an amazing set of experiences. I got a letter back a year or so ago from a priest who is now dedicated his life to interfaith communication. And it was kind of an interesting moment that came out of the secular teaching about religion, not teaching religion, but teaching the ideal of these traditions. I made 4 films for a very conservative Buddhist group, and I made them at the ideal level, and they were showing them in their visitor center, and it made liberals of all of the young men that it's not bad to be a liberal Buddhist. You are an engaged Buddhist. You engage in the world for the suffering of others. It is a wonderful thing to be a liberal Buddhist. Now, I like your term here in Hungary, illiberal, beyond liberal. That is really important because we've got to get out of false labels and those kinds of things. Anyway, you made a mistake, Professor Curtis, not having my wife here governing me. Anyway, I'll get off track every once in a while. Now, we're ready to come back to Jung and the mess that he made in his search for psychological types. I just want to show this because you may run into this Briggs-Myers personality indicator and the 16 personality types. You get that by the 4 multiplied by these 4 different temperaments. That's all I'm going to say about temperaments, because I even had to look it up as a warning that somebody might hold me responsible for sanguine, caloric, and all of that. Anyway, my wife is going to kill me for getting off track again. So, and he even threw in a bit of logic when you don't actually fit, but there is a maybe. And so by the time you multiply all of these together, you can end up with 16 personality types. And then, like astrology, you get a name for every one of these personalities. You're the conqueror, the submitter, or these kinds of things. And this is where we're going to move forward. You have to work really hard to clarify this out of these 1,600 pages. So I am going to locate on that, and this is what Jung becomes famous for in the academic realm when one studies Jung. It's not in this other stuff that psychologists are able to use as a way of giving people a colorful language to talk about their relationships and the kind of people that are in their family, so you can talk about a dysfunctional family and so forth. Now, we're going to get very quickly into the 2 different models. This is Jung's paradigm, and you're going to see over here the classical Indian model that will be brought to America by 2 members of the Hindu Renaissance, Ram Mohan Roy and Majumdar, who will come first, and then Vivekananda. And Vivekananda will be given credit for this. He will write 1 book on each of these, and I'll come back to that in as quickly as I can, because I do not want to spend too much time on Jung, except if you get some of the insights of the way Jung talks about our psychology, you'll understand that there is a psychology to our religious worship. And I'll have to use my wife as an illustration again, because she will be a really excellent example of how you can mix several paths or several different ways of worshiping together that do not seem compatible. So, quickly, Jung offers us the emotional or feeling type. Now, it's best to learn about this by looking at the feelings from a learning or experience point of view. Our feelings are our emotional self, values, likes, taste, our aesthetics, our judgment of beauty. All of this is emotional, or our feelings, according to Jung. And if you understand this as a way of knowing, you know differently when you are located in the emotional or feeling area. You value the world this way, and you experience the world this way. It is a personal world, and we'll come back to that as we get into the Indian model. And finally, it comes out of memory. You'll hear a person talking about a particular food they had in the past, a particular thing that is past related, and so at least remember a little bit about the feeling personality. These emotions are the same as before, except there's a transformative experience, and the highest positive emotion is the emotion of love. And you'll find that as we get into devotional religion and religious experience, that this is going to be a feature that we will actually see. Jung didn't develop very adequately. This will be central to our understanding of Hinduism, and if we begin to use the Indian model. Sensation then brings in the reality function. It's our 5 senses, but we might have, you know, the animal kingdom has 17 senses, and we don't have one sense that is the best one. An eagle can see a mouse from 3 kilometers in the sky. We don't have vision like that. And a mole can hear extraordinarily well. Now, I now appreciate hearing because I am deaf without hearing aids. And I lost one on the way over here tonight. It is dead under the doornail, and so I'm a half-deaf person tonight. And my whole life seems plagued with not hearing enough. Now, how can I be invited to talk about listening and interfaith communication when I can't hear? Well, this is the reality function tells us then what is brought to our attention. I could really move into this area of the senses because it's really important that we understand what a limited little creature we are in one sense, because we have become the top predator of the planet, the top polluter. Well, that's a counter message than the ideal one. The ideal one, religions bring to us, but our real situation is that we are a nasty little species. The ideal that religion brings to us is that we shouldn't be aggressive, we shouldn't be making war, we should be persons of love. Now that will get us into the intuitive way of knowing. The real way of knowing is what is happening in the world today. Every day our senses should be telling us what our mission is as religious people. We should be bringing the message that we know as religious people to the world without any fear of science or whatever else, because there is a vision that is there that has been lost. And it has been lost partly since the Enlightenment. It has been lost with the two world wars. Liberalism is just in shreds because we have lost the vision of the holy that we should be bringing in our dialogues. So the time is the present. You experience pain in the present. You experience this moment now. The thinking function is privileged in science. It is the rational function. Well, I heard Derrida at Page shift. He deconstructed this, the way of knowing, the thinking way. He deconstructed the intuitive. He deconstructed the way of knowing through emotions and through the senses. I went up to him afterwards and said that that's what all Chinese sages do. And he was very offended, but we wrote some letters back and forth on this very issue, because it's a multiple epistemological system. You can know 4 different paths, and this is only one. The logical function, the rational function is only one way of knowing, and it classifies, identifies, verbalizes, plans, and it is linear. Oh, great. We've done great science for 3 or 4 centuries using this epistemology, this methodology, but it is just one part of our ability if we were fully human beings. And so this is summarized again, and this ability to conceptualize using verbal expressions. I've been doing some reading in Chomsky and others on language, and I do not think that what makes us human is our language. Language is as deceptive as it is revelatory. I think our cerebral cortex expanded to accommodate our language ability to twist meaning and words, and so beware of trusting language. In fact, in interfaith dialogue, asking a person their beliefs is useless, especially for anybody that is not in the thinking modality. If they are doers or feelers, you ask them their belief system, that's their weakest area of response. Work with them. Do something with them, and then, or worship with them, and you'll see something more of them and their reality. Oh, I keep touching the laser button. So, intuition is the patterning function. Gestalt therapy talks about seeing the pattern. In intuition, you have that ability to leap to the tiniest bit of evidence to see the outline. It's a survival skill. If you're the tiniest thing that is being sought as food, you want to see the outline of the largest predator that is coming for you. If you are in a number of areas, like chess, the person that memorizes every chess move that they can loses to an intuitive who can see the pattern on the board. That's just brought out recently in some scientific studies, by the way. So what the possibilities might be, these are the future. You see ahead and see that pattern. This probably is what our prophets have been able to do. In fact, Zizi and I lived for the last 15 years in a poverty community in Hawaii. It is the poorest place in America in terms of the cost of living. And there I work as the archivist of an indigenous religion. Until just recently, they have been so persecuted that by the United States, of course, and I apologize for being an American. I should apologize at the beginning for having you suffer a American dialect, but our kapuna, our elders there, say that I have been given the ability to see over the horizon.
I don't, it just, things that are going to happen, awful things that are going to happen just seem too self-evident. And 5 years later, they remember that I said it, that it was coming, and it always comes. Worse than I said. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't feel like a prophet. All I feel like is that we're a terrible species and things don't really work out always very well. The time frame is the future. Seeing the future as now and having the ability then, if you are a planner, if you can mix this mode of knowing with the mode of planning, you have a perfect combination. So these are the functions. The patterning type sees a pattern, usually one of unity out of chaos. And so chaos is one of the great existential threats to our lives. Chaos is disorder, it harms, and being able to find a solution, a way out of that is the best. Jung theorized that somebody could get all of this together. Now just remember, he's just come out of mental illness, self-cured. And so he now is looking for a person who is self-actualized, who is integrated, who can understand and fully psychologically be one, unified in all of these functions. And he can't find them. He hears about it in the Upanishads. They talk about the Jivan Mukti, the person that is free because they have learned to approach the divine from 4 different ways appropriately at once. He hears of other terms, the Buddha. And in Taoism, there are the saints and the sages in Chinese philosophy. Jung hears about it, he looks for it, and he has to write this from his own perspective. He does get a chance later on in India to meet Ramana Maharshi in the 1930s when he's receiving 2 honorary doctorates in India for his work, and he refuses to go 50 miles to the ashram of Ramana Maharshi because he knows an Indian couldn't be perfect. So, oops. Anyway, I shouldn't have said that, but he did. So, Jung has the 4 types. The classical 4 types, spiritual types, is really the heart of what I wanted to talk about tonight. But if I did that without building that on Jung, I don't think you would listen to me, right? Anyway, here is what Vivekananda brought to the West. This is the classical model. Vivekananda didn't actually understand it because he got the top 2. He called this the intellectual type and that the mystical type. And the book that he wrote on each of them quotes the same sources and basically comes to the same conclusion. The source behind him is Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and that's where I will be coming from. But Jung didn't have access to him, and so he only had access to Vivekananda. Jhana is translated thinking or cognition. I'm using cognition because thinking is a privileged term in the West. it's superior to everything, right? If you're a thinking person, if you're a cognitional person that doesn't have quite the same elevation in class. Raja is royal or kingly, and the royal or highest path. Path is marga, and practice is yoga. And so there is a practice and a religious path that is involved. If you're on a religious path, there is a practice involved with it. Bhakti is simply devotion. Now, Zizi and I had a really hard time with Hungarian. What term? I mean, Hungarian must have 1,000 terms for everything, right? And every one of them has a nuance and appropriateness to it. And adoration, prayerfulness, all of these things are gathered together in bhakti. And I'll show you a slide of that in a moment. So, and karma, krit is to do, karma is to act. And so these actions, this will be our ritual or ritualistic or actional type of religion. And you'll be surprised how much of you in worship is involved in this area. Okay, so devotional religious experience is centered in feeling, emotions. It is feeling personally the joys on the positive side and the guilts and the shame on the negative side, the angers that can be in life. It is natural for the devotional to pray because God is personal. I lost a girlfriend once, went to her church, and her pastor prayed a 30-minute prayer to collect the offering, and telling you to empty your pockets and all of that. And I asked her, was he talking to God? And isn't that what prayer is about? Now, do you understand? Prayer is a communication. It is a personal act of devotion. And it is meaningful if you are legitimately knowing the divine and on the divine path. Otherwise, a lot of people who are very religious are just silent. They don't pray out loud. That's my defense against my wife, by the way. I do not like praying out loud because there is a communication that is alone, naked before God. And so that is something that is terribly meaningful to me, coming from a fundamentalist background that used prayer wrongly. So, the transformative experience is extremely powerful. It is an experience of feeling God's love. Now, love is personal, and a devotional only worships and experiences a personal God. It's not it won't be like the other paths. The emotional approach, the personal approach is knowing the God of love, and that love is grace. It is not like my son thought when he started dating and that he was God's gift to the universe. No, it is not. Grace is undeserved. And so this is something that comes to us. It is an experience like no other, and it is totally transformative. It transforms the person that experiences grace, and maybe they will become an agent of grace. Here's some examples. And I want you to notice this young woman. This is a time when Tardy Laszlo was on the stage with the Pope, with the choir, and my wife handed the Pope a Transylvanian
candlestick. Candlestick.
Yes, and he blessed her with a child's blessing. She is a devotional. She goes to the Catholic Church to experience the joy and the beauty of worship in a way that is fundamental to her soul. But she's also a questioner. And so she's a Unitarian. She's actually a ordained Unitarian minister. And so, can you see? She has a dual path and a dual membership. Not that she can have membership in both places, but the others, you will see, here's Buddhist, here's Hindu, again, another Japanese example here could either be Shinto or Buddhist, and over here is Buddhist. So I just want you to know that in interfaith dialogue, if you understand your type well, and the seriousness of it, and the mechanisms of it, you may be able to talk easily with other devotionals. Or you may be more threatened by them. I don't know. It's a question. The cognitional or thinking religious experience is reason, question, and the struggle that one has with dogmas and pronouncements. There's an insistence on logic and clarity and so forth. And this is the least stable of all religious positions, because the rational can always ask another question and always need to read another book. And this is a difficult path. And I have a couple of wonderful Hindu scholars that I wanted to share with you. Dr. Rao here is a Vaishnava. He worships Vishnu. He has written volume after volume on the thousands of Hindu idols. They're not called idols in India. Not at all. But I won't bother you with 4 Sanskrit terms that would cover just the Vaishnava attitude toward objects that are ordained with the holy. Now, he's doing a recording for me here on Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the most radical of Hindu scholars and philosophers, who probably brought all 4 types, 4 spiritual paths together. I don't know, he died in the 1830s in England, and long story, and there's no way of judging. I tried to gather his Ram Mohan Roy's missing writings together, and they have been carefully burned and destroyed, worst of all, by Danish Baptists, whom Ram Mohan Roy gave them a set of all of his writings in all of his languages, and they destroyed them because a very conservative person came in and destroyed those writings. The other one is a Ram Mohan Roy expert from the Brahma Samaj, the group that comes out. And then here's what scholars study, scripture. And so this actually isn't Sanskrit. This came from a project of trying to innocently gather all of the varieties, all of the versions of the Bhagavad Gita. And it took me into 8 different languages in India, and discovered that the kings actually did a better job of saving these documents than the Brahmins did, the scholars did. Anyway, this is an example of the kind of theologians and philosophers and all who try to approach the divine in a rational way. Then there is what many scholars have called the most primitive form of religion, because it can't express itself. Let's see. It's rituals, it's performative, dance, and all of the wonderful things that you find that the senses respond to. This is the sensate area. Now, it's about movement, so there are things that look like the martial arts, where one is moving to try and experience the divine through movement. There is the visual arts, and this is something that singing. Didn't you experience just a tiny uplift when the choir was here or when the flute was being played? There is something that our senses could help us do. And I come from a very impoverished religious path that didn't really do enough in these areas. So, of course, my wife goes to Marcos Temple just because of the beauty and the culture and everything that is there to glorify God and to lift you on your path. So I didn't have with me enough things to illustrate the variety. I could have shown you some clips on Indian dancing and Hawaiian dancing and singing and all kinds of things that were there. Here's some art over here. This happens to be from the theme from the Bhagavad Gita. This is Misogi. It's water purification. It's kind of like baptism, I guess. You're washing all your sins away. But this is in cold water. I mean, really cold water. It is winter time, and you can see how this goes. This is River Misogi. This is Waterfall Misogi. This is a ritual. Again, it's like devotion, but the ritual is looked at often by scholars. There's no meaning to it. It's just done every time. Wrong. The senses draw one into a belonging, into a community, and the whole thing that Japanese religion teaches us is that religion is for community, and these rituals build community over and over again, giving us our place in community. And finally, the mystical is a path that is quite impersonal. I mean, you lose your personhood as you try to become one with the universe, one with nature. You identify patterns of wholeness. There is the inward journey, the outward flight. All of these patterns bring us to a different kind of meaning, and the difficulty is with questioners and thinkers and nitpickers that are asking an intuitive, what do you mean? What have you experienced? The mystic has experienced the wonder of silence, of going into emptiness and nothingness. And so all I could do was just show you a few things. The Zen path, I mean, this is not a master. It was just a student like me who can sit for a while in Seiza and meditate. This is Raja Rammohan Roy, who was a true mystic. I mean, he really worshipped in silence and was troubled by people that ask over and over the same old questions over and over again. The last 7 years of his life, I got a chance to study Shinichiro Imaoka. He lived to be 106, and this is his deathbed. He had been in a coma for more than 3 months. His daughter-in-law asked me if I would take a picture. I set up the camera, I walked over, and he woke up. And he talked to me for about 15 minutes, and this is a disciple of his, Misakiyama, who was there, who went in as well. And then he closed his eyes and died a couple of weeks later. He never woke up again. It was an experience that was jarring for me. It seemed the kind of thing that mystics do. One last story. I will talk about the integration of all 4 of these paths, but Zizi and I went to Nepal. My second meeting of Father Cap Miller, a Jesuit mystic, following a couple of paths. He was doing a retreat for 10 or 11 disciples, priests from India in Nepal, and they went to the very end of the road up by Tibet, and he invited us to go up there. And it was only 6 days after the invitation that I cleared my research, and we decided to go. It was a dangerous ride up to the end of that road in the Himalayas. And there were 2 priests waiting for us. He said to his young priest, George and Zizi are coming today. I want 2 volunteers to go meet the bus. He had no way, rationally, of knowing that we were coming. You can't call there. You can't get there. We almost went over the cliff. It was sometimes 4,000-foot drop from the highway to the little river that cut its way through. And then there was a magical time together, mass and special time with him, and then that horrible trip back to Kathmandu. Yes, there are people like Jung was looking for. that are fully integrated. Religious people who have something to tell this world and this species of ours, that there is something in religion that cannot be fabricated. Wake up, my friends. I'm going to end here because you probably are ready to go to sleep. Thank you.
Testvéreim, akkor megköszönöm a kedves részvételt mindenkinek, akik hűségesen kitartottak. Online nézőinket is szeretettel köszöntöm, most elbúcsúzunk, és be is zárom akkor a utónom szerint Ecumenikus kutatócsoportnak a második konferenciáját. További szép estét és eredményes időszakot. Dicsértessék a Jézus Krisztus!